Chapter 26. If Earth was the heart of human civilization, Reach was its sword. Located in the Epsilon Eridani system, Reach occupied a unique position within human space. It was humanity's greatest military stronghold, a center of industry, training, research, and fleet operations. Massive shipyards orbited the planet. Military academies trained generations of officers. Advanced research facilities pushed the limits of human technology. Entire fleets called Reach home. For decades, it represented security. When colonies on the frontier fell, many civilians found comfort in the existence of Reach. Earth might be humanity's birthplace, but Reach was humanity's shield. If the Covenant ever pushed deep enough to threaten it, something had gone terribly wrong. By 2552, something had. The years leading up to the fall of Reach were among the darkest of the war. Humanity had already lost countless colonies. Entire sectors of space had effectively disappeared from the map. Refugees flooded surviving worlds. Naval losses mounted faster than new vessels could be constructed. The UNSC continued fighting, but every strategic projection painted the same grim picture. Humanity was running out of places to retreat. This reality shaped every military decision made during the final years before Reach. The Spartan IIs found themselves deployed almost constantly. New Spartan programs expanded upon Halsey's original work. The Spartan IIIs entered service in growing numbers. Entire generations of soldiers sacrificed themselves in operations designed not to achieve victory, but to delay defeat. Every month mattered. Every year mattered. The UNSC understood that if humanity could somehow survive long enough, opportunities might emerge. The Covenant understood something similar. They only needed to keep advancing. Against this backdrop, Dr. Halsey continued pursuing projects she believed might alter humanity's fate. Artificial intelligence research accelerated. Mjolnir armor systems improved. ONI launched increasingly ambitious operations. Every branch of the military searched desperately for some advantage capable of shifting the balance. None arrived. Not yet. Meanwhile, Covenant forces continued expanding their knowledge of human space. This process was slower than many people realize. Contrary to popular belief, the Covenant did not possess a complete map of humanity's territory. They discovered many human worlds through captured navigational data, reconnaissance efforts, and simple persistence. This fact became critically important because humanity possessed one final defensive advantage: the location of Earth. For most of the war, the Covenant did not know where humanity's homeworld was located. The Cole Protocol existed specifically to keep it that way. Named after Vice Admiral Preston Cole, the protocol required extraordinary measures whenever ships risked falling into enemy hands. Navigation databases were erased. Records were destroyed. Crews sometimes sacrificed themselves rather than allow information to be captured. The policy sounds extreme, and it was, but it was also necessary. Everyone understood that if the Covenant ever located Earth, the war would likely end. Reach therefore occupied a dangerous position within humanity's strategy. It served as both a fortress and a buffer. If Reach stood, Earth remained protected. If Reach fell, nothing significant remained between the Covenant and humanity's birthplace. The tragedy began quietly. In the summer of 2552, strange reports emerged from remote regions of the system. Communications failed. Missing patrols. Unusual activity. At first, these incidents appeared isolated. Reach had survived decades of war. Local commanders had little reason to assume catastrophe. Then the evidence accumulated. The Covenant had arrived. One of Halo's greatest strengths as a story is that it often presents disaster not as a single moment, but as a realization. Reach did not fall the instant Covenant forces entered the system. Instead, understanding spread gradually throughout military channels. Then panic followed. The Covenant presence was far larger than expected. What initially appeared to be a limited incursion revealed itself as a full-scale invasion. For the Spartans stationed on Reach, the discovery triggered immediate deployments. Teams were dispatched across the planet. Reconnaissance missions became combat operations. Defensive actions multiplied. Every available asset was thrown into the fight. Among those present was Noble Team. The events surrounding Noble Team are told primarily through Halo Reach, one of the most beloved entries in the franchise. Their story provides a ground-level view of the catastrophe unfolding around them. Through their eyes, players witness the collapse of humanity's greatest fortress world. The significance of Noble Team extends beyond their individual actions. They represent something fundamental about Halo. Ordinary people do not save Reach. Heroes do not save Reach. No one saves Reach. Sometimes history contains battles that cannot be won. The objective becomes buying time. As Covenant forces expanded their operations, the scale of the invasion became impossible to conceal. Massive fleets entered the system. Orbital defenses engaged. Naval battles erupted throughout local space. Shipyards that had spent decades constructing humanity's warships suddenly became battlefields. The UNSC fought desperately, and in many places effectively. Human crews often exceeded every expectation. Individual vessels inflicted disproportionate damage. Ground forces held positions long after logic suggested withdrawal. Spartans performed feats that bordered on the impossible. Yet the same pattern that had defined the entire war repeated itself. The Covenant simply had more. More ships, soldiers, resources, and more time. One by one, defensive lines collapsed. Orbital stations were destroyed. Fleet formations shattered. Entire regions of Reach disappeared beneath plasma fire. For civilians, the experience was apocalyptic. Cities evacuated under impossible conditions. Families became separated. Emergency broadcasts filled communication networks. Refugee convoys clogged transportation routes. Millions attempted to escape while there was still time. Many never did. The glassing of Reach ranks among the greatest tragedies in human history. Not because it was unique, because it proved that no world was safe. If Reach could fall, anything could fall. That realization spread throughout humanity with devastating force. Military leaders saw it, politicians saw it, and ordinary citizens saw it. For the first time, many began contemplating a future in which the Covenant actually won. Amid the chaos, however, events were unfolding that would shape everything that followed. A ship called the Pillar of Autumn escaped the dying world. Aboard it was one of the last remaining Spartan twos, John 117, the Master Chief. At the time, nobody understood the significance of that departure. It appeared to be one more evacuation among countless others, one more desperate attempt to preserve valuable personnel and information. History would remember it differently, because Reach was not merely the end of a chapter. It was the doorway into a story most people know as Halo. The Covenant had destroyed humanity's greatest fortress. Earth stood exposed. Humanity stood on the brink of extinction. And somewhere beyond Reach, hidden among the stars, the Pillar of Autumn was racing toward a discovery that would change the fate of the galaxy. A ring. An impossible ring. A relic older than civilization itself. Halo. Chapter 27. On September 19th, 2552, humanity lost Reach. Days later, it found Halo. The connection between those events is one of the great accidents of history, or perhaps not an accident at all. Throughout Halo's lore, there is a reoccurring theme that stretches back to the Librarian, the Precursors, and even the ancient relationship between humanity and the Mantle. Again and again, Seemingly random events place individuals exactly where they need to be at exactly the right moment. Whether this represents fate, design, or simple coincidence remains open to interpretation. What is certain is that if the Pillar of Autumn had not escaped Reach, the story of the galaxy would have ended very differently. The ship's commanding officer, Captain Jacob Keyes, carried with him some of humanity's most valuable assets. Among them were Dr. Catherine Halsey's revolutionary artificial intelligence, Cortana, and Spartan 117, the Master Chief. Both would prove indispensable. The Autumn emerged from slipspace near an object that initially defied belief. A ring. Not a planet, not a station. A ring. Stretching thousands of kilometers across space. The structure appeared impossible. Its inner surface contained mountains, forests, rivers, oceans, and atmosphere. Entire ecosystems existed upon a curved landscape suspended in the void. Even in a galaxy familiar with extraordinary technology, Halo was astonishing. For the Covenant, the discovery was a religious event. For humanity, it was a mystery. Neither side understood the truth. Yet. The Covenant fleet pursuing the Autumn arrived shortly afterward, forcing immediate conflict. The ship suffered catastrophic damage, and Captain Keyes ordered evacuation. Escape pods launched toward the ring's surface. Human survivors scattered across an alien world older than recorded history. Among them was the Master Chief. The opening hours of the first Halo game are often remembered as a straightforward survival story. In reality, they represent the moment when modern humanity collided directly with the deepest secrets of galactic history. The Chief's initial objectives were simple: find survivors, organize resistance, protect Cortana, and escape. At this stage, neither he nor anyone else understood what Halo truly was. Captain Keyes quickly became a focal point for surviving human forces. One of humanity's greatest respected naval officers, Keyes possessed a remarkable ability to remain effective under impossible circumstances. Throughout the Reach campaign, he had repeatedly demonstrated courage and creativity. Those same qualities now became essential as scattered survivals struggled to stay alive on an alien megastructure occupied by hostile forces. Meanwhile, the Covenant pursued their own objectives. To them, Halo represented a sacred discovery beyond measure. The installation appeared to confirm centuries of religious doctrine. Here was a genuine Forerunner artifact unlike anything previously encountered. Prophets and commanders alike believed they stood on the threshold of revelations that could bring them closer to the great journey. The irony was devastating. The Covenant had spent generations searching for proof of divine transcendence. Instead, they had discovered a weapon built to prevent extinction. The distinction would soon become very important. As Master Chief explored the installation, additional mysteries emerged. The ring contained vast underground facilities. Ancient systems remained active despite their incredible age. Automated mechanisms continued operating exactly as they had 100,000 years earlier. Most intriguing of all was the presence of an artificial intelligence known as 343 Guilty Spark, the Monitor. To understand why Guilty Spark matters, one must remember the Forerunner's final days. When the Halo array fired, countless automated systems remained behind. Monitors were responsible for maintaining installations, preserving functionality, and ensuring readiness should Halo ever be required again. For 100,000 years, Guilty Spark had waited, alone, performing duties assigned by creators long since dead. The encounter between the Monitor and the Master Chief is one of Halo's most significant moments. For the first time since the fall of the Ecumene, a representative of modern humanity stood face to face with a direct remnant of the Forerunner age. Neither fully understood the importance of the meeting, at least not initially. Then everything changed. While investigating unusual activity on the ring, Captain Keyes and his forces discovered something hidden deep within the installation, or more accurately, something imprisoned within: the Flood. One of the greatest strengths of the original Halo Combat Evolved is how effectively it recreates the horror experienced by its characters. Until this point, the game appears to be a story about humans fighting aliens. Then, ancient containment facilities are breached, and the true danger emerges. Suddenly, everything changes. The Covenant are no longer the greatest threat. The Flood's return carries enormous historical significance. For 100,000 years, the parasite had remained imprisoned. Civilizations rose and fell without understanding the danger sleeping beneath their feet. Entire religions developed around Forerunner relics, while remaining ignorant of why many of those relics existed in the first place. Now the prison doors stood open. The Flood immediately demonstrated why it had once defeated both ancient humanity and the Forerunners. Human soldiers fell. Covenant warriors fell. Every casualty risked becoming another Flood combat form. Every battle strengthened the parasite. The situation escalated rapidly. What began as a conflict between humanity and the Covenant transformed into a three-sided struggle for survival. For Guilty Spark, however, the solution appeared obvious: Halo. The Monitor viewed the outbreak through the lens of ancient protocol. The Flood had escaped containment. Therefore, the installation should be activated. That was its purpose. That is why Halo existed. At first, Master Chief and Cortana lacked the context necessary to understand the implications. Then Cortana accessed the installation systems and learned the truth. Halo was not a weapon against the Flood, not directly. It was a weapon against life. The same terrible revelation that had once divided the Didact and the Builders now confronted humanity. Activating the ring would indeed stop the Flood. It would also kill every sentient being within its range. 100,000 years earlier, the Forerunners had accepted that price. The Master Chief refused. The conflict stakes instantly expanded from the survival of a few scattered soldiers to the survival of entire civilizations. If Halo fired, humanity would perish. The Covenant would perish. Countless species would perish. The Flood would be starved. The galaxy would pay the price. And so, for the second time in history, someone stood against the activation of Halo. The difference was that this time it was not the Didact, it was a Spartan. The final battle for Installation 4 became a race against catastrophe. Covenant forces pursued their religious objectives. Guilty Spark pursued its programming. The Flood pursued expansion. Master Chief pursued survival. The destruction of the ring ultimately prevented activation and contained the immediate outbreak. Yet victory came at tremendous cost. Captain Keyes was lost. Human forces suffered catastrophic casualties. The installation itself was destroyed. Still, the galaxy survived, for the moment. More importantly, ancient secrets had begun resurfacing. Humanity now knew the Halo rings existed. The Flood had returned. The Covenant's religion had encountered truths it could not easily explain. And somewhere among the stars, the prophets were already moving toward their next great mistake. Because Installation 4 was not the only Halo, not even close. The road ahead would lead to another ring, another prophet, another Gravemind, and eventually to the greatest city the Covenant had ever built, High Charity. The war was no longer simply about survival. It had become a race to uncover the truth before the truth destroyed everyone. Chapter 28. The destruction of Installation 4 should have been a triumph. Humanity had survived. The Halo ring had been destroyed. The immediate Flood outbreak had been contained. Master Chief had accomplished what even the Forerunners themselves had failed to do 100,000 years earlier. He had prevented the activation of Halo without sacrificing the galaxy. Yet from the Covenant's perspective, the event was nothing short of catastrophic. A sacred artifact had been lost. A halo ring, one of the holiest objects in Covenant religion, had been destroyed under the watch of Covenant leadership. Entire fleets had been annihilated. The flood had escaped containment. Most importantly, questions were beginning to emerge. Questions were dangerous. The Covenant had survived for centuries because its people believed in the great journey, the prophets, and the divine nature of the forerunners. Every failure threatened those beliefs. Every contradiction threatened the empire itself. Someone needed to be blamed. That responsibility fell upon one Sangheili commander, Thel Vatami. History would remember him differently. The Arbiter. Before becoming the Arbiter, Thel had been one of the Covenant's most respected military leaders. He had commanded fleets, won victories, and earned tremendous prestige among the Sangheili. His reputation for discipline and competence was well established. Then Halo was destroyed. Within the Covenant hierarchy, failure rarely went unpunished. The prophets publicly humiliated him. His titles were stripped away. His achievements were erased. He was branded a disgrace before the very empire he had spent his life serving. The punishment was carefully calculated. The prophets needed a scapegoat. Thel became one. Yet the prophets also recognized something useful about him. The position of Arbiter occupied a unique place within Covenant history. Officially, it represented one of the greatest honors available to a warrior. In practice, it often served a different purpose. Arbiters were sent to die, given impossible missions, assigned tasks too dangerous for ordinary commanders. If they succeeded, the Covenant benefited. If they die, the problem disappeared. Either outcome served the prophets. Thel accepted the role, not because he trusted the prophets, because he believed in the Covenant. At least, he still did. Meanwhile, humanity remained locked in a desperate struggle for survival. The destruction of Halo had not changed the larger strategic situation. The Covenant still possessed overwhelming advantages. Human colonies continued falling. Earth remained under threat. The UNSC knew that a single victory could not reverse decades of losses. The war continued. Yet beneath the surface, the Covenant itself was beginning to fracture. The roots of this fracture stretched back centuries. The Covenant appeared unified, but it was built upon an uneasy balance between species. The Sangheili served as warriors and military leaders. The prophets provided spiritual authority. Other species occupied different roles within the empire. As long as the Covenant continued succeeding, these arrangements functioned. Success hides many problems. Failure exposes them. The prophets increasingly viewed the Sangheili as a threat. Elite commanders possessed immense influence. Their honor culture encouraged independent thought. Many were respected by their troops more than Covenant politicians were. Most dangerously, some Sangheili were beginning to ask questions. Questions about Halo, questions about the flood, about humanity, and about the great journey. The prophets could tolerate military defeats. They could not tolerate doubt. At the center of these events stood the High Prophet of Truth. Among all Covenant leaders, Truth may be one of the most dangerous figures in Halo history. He did not possess the physical power of a Spartan. He did not command fleets through personal military genius. Instead, he understood something far more important. Power comes from controlling belief. Truth had learned enough about humanity's connection to the Forerunners to understand the threat it posed. He may not have known every detail of ancient history, but he knew enough. Humanity's existence contradicted Covenant doctrine. If that contradiction became widely known, the Empire would collapse. Everything he did afterward was shaped by that realization. Meanwhile, another Halo ring had been discovered, Installation 5. Unlike the first ring, this one remained intact. The discovery immediately attracted enormous attention. Covenant leaders viewed it as another opportunity to fulfill the great journey. Human forces saw it as a strategic threat, hidden beneath the surface. Older forces stirred as well. The flood had survived. This is another important truth many people overlook. The flood was never destroyed at Installation 4. The outbreak was contained. The ring was destroyed. The parasite itself endured. And on Installation 5, it had been waiting. Deep within the installation lurked a grave mind. The first fully realized grave mind players encounter in the games. To understand the significance of this creature, one must remember everything we discussed during the Forerunner saga. The grave mind is not merely a monster, it is the accumulated intelligence of countless consumed lives. It carries memories stretching across civilizations. It remembers ancient humanity. It remembers the Forerunners. It remembers the Flood War. In many ways, the grave mind is a living bridge between the modern era and the ancient history of the galaxy. When it speaks, the past speaks. Both Master Chief and the Arbiter eventually find themselves drawn into the grave mind's plans. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of Halo 2. The Chief and the Arbiter begin as enemies. One fights for humanity, the other fights for the Covenant. Yet both gradually discover that they are being manipulated by forces far larger than themselves. The Prophets seek power. The grave mind seeks survival. Ancient Forerunner systems continue following protocols written 100,000 years earlier. And caught in the middle are two soldiers trying to understand what is actually happening. The Arbiter's journey becomes especially important. Mission by mission, he encounters evidence that challenges everything he believes. The Flood are not what Covenant doctrine claims. Halo is not what Covenant doctrine claims. The prophets themselves begin behaving in ways that raise disturbing questions. For the first time in his life, faith and evidence no longer align. That conflict tears at him, because once doubt enters a belief system, it rarely leaves. As events accelerate, truth begins implementing plans that reveal his true intentions. The Sangheili are gradually pushed aside. Positions of authority are reassigned. Another species, the Gyrohane, known to humans as brutes, begin receiving increasing favor. Most Covenant citizens do not recognize the danger. Many Sangheili do. The prophets are preparing for something. The only question is what? By the end of the campaign, the answer becomes horrifyingly clear. Truth has no intention of sharing power. The Covenant is no longer merely fighting humanity. It is beginning to consume itself. The stage is now set for one of the most devastating civil wars in galactic history, the Great Schism, the collapse of the Covenant, and a final race to prevent the activation of every Halo ring in existence. The ancient mistakes of the Forerunners are about to repeat themselves. Only this time, the fate of the galaxy rests in the hands of a Spartan and a heretic. Chapter 29. For centuries, the Covenant appeared unbreakable. Its fleets dominated the stars. Its armies conquered entire civilizations. Its religion united trillions beneath a single purpose. To outsiders, the Covenant seemed less like an empire and more like a force of nature. Humanity certainly viewed it that way. For most of the war, UNSC leaders never seriously considered the possibility that the Covenant might collapse. Their concern was survival. The Covenant was too large, too powerful, and too unified to defeat through conventional means. What humanity did not realize was that the Covenant's greatest weakness had always existed at its center, its faith. The Empire had been built upon belief. Every species, every fleet, every institution ultimately derived legitimacy from the Great Journey. As long as people believed, the Covenant endured. But belief is fragile. Once doubt begins spreading, it rarely stops. By the final months of 2552, doubt had become impossible to contain. The Arbiter's experiences on Installation 5 shattered many of the assumptions he had carried throughout his life. Halo was not a pathway to transcendence. The flood was not a minor obstacle placed before the faithful. The prophets were not behaving like spiritual leaders seeking truth. They were behaving like politicians protecting power. The distinction changed everything. Meanwhile, the high prophet of truth continued moving his plans forward. Of the three hierarchs, truth proved the most dangerous because he understood exactly what was happening. Mercy was dead. Regret had been killed during the events on Delta Halo. Only truth remained, and truth had no intention of surrendering control. The Sangheili represented a problem. For generations, they had served as the military backbone of the Covenant. Their fleets protected the Empire. Their warriors enforced its will. Their commanders enjoyed enormous prestige and influence. Most importantly, many Sangheili still valued honor above obedience. That made them difficult to control. Truth increasingly favored the Gyrohane. The brutes were powerful, aggressive, and fiercely loyal when properly managed. More importantly, they depended upon the prophets for their position within Covenant society. They lacked the independent power structures that made the Sangheili dangerous. The transition began quietly. Promotions shifted. Responsibilities changed. Military commands were reassigned. Then the mask came off. The assassination of the Sangheili High Counselors transformed political tension into open warfare. Across Covenant-controlled space, brutes turned upon elites. Elites retaliated, fleets divided, garrisons erupted into violence. Entire worlds found themselves caught between factions that had once fought side by side. The Great Schism had begun. The name was fitting. This was not merely a civil war. It was the shattering of the Covenant itself. One of Halo's recurring themes is that civilizations often collapse because of internal contradictions rather than external enemies. The Forerunners spent millions of years believing themselves worthy of the mantle while ignoring the consequences of their own actions. Ancient humanity fought the flood while simultaneously fighting the Ecumene. The Covenant preached unity while maintaining deep divisions between its member species. Eventually, those contradictions became impossible to ignore. The Great Schism was the moment that Covenant's contradictions finally exploded. For humanity, the development was almost incomprehensible. After decades of retreat, defeat, and near extinction, the enemy suddenly began fighting itself. Entire Covenant fleets turned against one another. Strategic objectives were abandoned. Military resources were redirected toward internal conflict. Systems that had once coordinated flawlessly descended into chaos. The war was not over, but for the first time, humanity could imagine surviving it. At the center of these events stood the Arbiter. Thel 'Vadam's transformation is one of the most important character arcs in Halo's history, because it mirrors the larger transformation occurring throughout the Covenant. He began as a believer. He became a servant, then a victim, then a skeptic. Now he became something else, a leader. The Arbiter no longer fought for the Covenant. He fought for the truth, for his people, and for survival. The alliance that gradually emerged between humanity and the Sangheili would have seemed impossible only months earlier. Years of hatred and bloodshed separated the two species. Entire worlds had burned. Billions were dead. Few humans trusted elites. Few elites trusted humans. Yet history has a way of creating strange allies. Both sides now face the same enemy: truth, the flood, and the activation of Halo. While the Covenant fractured, another ancient threat was moving. The Gravemind had not remained idle. Ever since its emergence on Installation 5, it had been observing, manipulating, and planning. Like its predecessors during the Forerunner era, it understood how to exploit division. It understood how to turn enemies against one another. Most importantly, it understood opportunity. The Civil War provided one. High Charity, the Covenant's capital city, represented one of the greatest concentrations of population in the modern galaxy, home to billions, filled with military resources, political leadership, and transportation infrastructure. It was the beating heart of the Covenant Empire. It was also exactly the sort of target the Flood prefers. When the parasite finally reached the city, the results were catastrophic. The fall of High Charity echoes the fall of ancient Forerunner worlds 100,000 years earlier. The same patterns emerged. Confusion became panic, and panic became collapse. Defensive systems failed. Entire districts disappeared beneath waves of infection. Military units that should have coordinated became isolated and overwhelmed. With astonishingly little time, the Flood controlled the greatest city in the Covenant. The symbolism was almost poetic. The empire built upon misunderstanding the Forerunners had become infected by the same parasite that destroyed the Forerunners themselves. History was repeating. The Gravemind seized control of High Charity and transformed it into something horrifying. What had once been a center of civilization became a mobile flood hive. Billions were absorbed. Countless memories joined the collective intelligence of the parasite. Every victim strengthened it. The Flood had returned to galactic relevance, not as a hidden danger, not as an isolated outbreak, as a civilization-ending threat once again. For students of Halo lore, this is one of the most chilling moments in the entire timeline. Everything the Forerunners feared, everything ancient humanity fought against, everything the Halo array had been created to stop. It was happening again, and this time, no Akumene existed to resist it. No galaxy-spanning empire remained, only scattered survivors, a Spartan, an Arbiter, and a handful of allies racing against extinction. Meanwhile, truth pressed forward. The destruction around him did not matter. The collapse of the Covenant did not matter. The deaths of billions did not matter. Like many fanatics throughout history, he had become convinced that only his vision of the future mattered. He set his course for Earth, then beyond, toward the Ark, toward the final secrets of the Forerunners, toward the mechanism capable of activating every Halo ring in existence. The Great Schism had shattered the Covenant. The Flood had consumed High Charity. The ancient war between life and extinction had returned, and all roads now led to Earth. Soon, humanity's homeworld would become the center of galactic history again. Chapter 30. For the second time in its history, Earth stood at the center of the galaxy. The first time had occurred 100,000 years earlier, when the librarian chose humanity as the species most worthy of preservation. Few living humans know that story. Fewer still understand the significance of their homeworld within the larger history of the galaxy. To most people in 2552, Earth was simply home, the birthplace of humanity, the final refuge, the last line of defense. If Earth fell, there would be nowhere left to retreat. The Covenant's arrival transformed that fear into reality. For decades, humanity had fought to keep Earth's location secret. Entire fleets had sacrificed themselves under the Cole Protocol. Captains had erased navigation databases. Crews had died protecting information most civilians never even knew existed. All of those sacrifices delayed the inevitable. They did not prevent it. When the prophet of regret arrived at Earth during the events of Halo 2, humanity's greatest secret was finally exposed. The Covenant now knew where the species originated. More importantly, the remaining hierarch, Truth, had plans that extended far beyond conquest. Earth was not his destination. It was a key. Beneath the African continent, hidden for 100,000 years, lay one of the Forerunners' greatest secrets, a portal. not merely a transportation device, a gateway connecting Earth to a location beyond the galaxy itself, the Ark. To understand why the Ark matters, one must return to the final days of the Ecumene. During the Flood War, the Forerunners needed a location beyond the reach of the halo array, a place where the rings could be constructed, maintained, and controlled, a place where life could endure even after galactic extinction. The result was the Ark. Officially designated Installation 00, it served as the command center for the entire Halo network. Every ring ultimately answered to it. Every activation sequence passed through it. Every final decision regarding the array originated there. The Ark was not merely another Forerunner installation. It was the center of the entire system, and truth intended to reach it. The battle for Earth, therefore, became something larger than a conventional military engagement. Covenant fleets attacked human defenses across the planet. Cities came under threat. Orbital battles raged above the atmosphere. Millions found themselves caught in the middle of a conflict they barely understood. Yet even amid the chaos, something remarkable was happening. The Covenant was dying. The Great Schism continued spreading throughout the Empire. Sangheili forces openly opposed the Prophets. Former allies became enemies. Entire fleets fragmented along political and ideological lines. The Covenant that had terrorized humanity for nearly 3 decades no longer existed as a unified power. Truth still commanded enormous resources, but he no longer commanded the Covenant. He commanded only its remnants. The distinction would prove fatal. Meanwhile, Master Chief returned to Earth after the events of Installation 5. By now, his reputation had transcended ordinary military achievement. Stories about Spartan 117 spread throughout human space. Soldiers spoke his name with admiration. Civilians viewed him as a symbol of resistance. The reality remained much simpler. John was still doing what he had always done, completing the mission. One of the reasons Master Chief works so well as a character is that he rarely views himself the way others do. He does not think of himself as humanity's savior. He does not seek glory. He focuses on objectives. He solves problems. He keeps moving forward. That mindset would soon carry him to the most important battlefield in modern history. The Arbiter joined him. The alliance between humanity and the Sangheili remains one of Halo's most significant developments because it demonstrates how thoroughly the Prophets had failed. For generations, both species had viewed each other as mortal enemies. Billions died because of that conflict. Yet once the lies were exposed, cooperation became possible. Not easy, not immediate, but possible. The Arbiter's journey had brought him from loyal servant of the Covenant to its greatest opponent. More than any other living Sangheili, he understood the magnitude of the betrayal. The Prophets had manipulated entire species. They had hidden the truth. They had sacrificed countless lives to preserve power. Truth's name had become deeply ironic. As Covenant and human forces battle across Earth, Truth activated the portal hidden beneath Africa. The structure awakened after 100,000 years of silence. Ancient machinery came alive. Massive energy discharges illuminated the sky. Then the gateway opened. What emerged was a passage to another realm entirely. The Ark awaited. Truth departed first. Human and Sangheili forces followed. The journey carried them beyond the galaxy itself. The significance of this moment is difficult to overstate. Throughout Halo's history, countless civilizations had sought Forerunner secrets. Ancient humanity fought wars influenced by them. The Covenant built an empire around them. Entire religions formed around incomplete understanding. Now, for the first time, representatives of modern humanity and the Sangheili were traveling directly to the center of Forerunner legacy. The Ark exceeded every expectation. Its scale bordered on incomprehensible. Vast landscapes stretched beyond the horizon. Automated systems continued functioning despite the passage of ages. Construction facilities remained active. Ancient mechanisms carried out instructions written before modern civilization existed. The Forerunners were gone. Their works endured. Truth immediately began pursuing activation of the halo array. His reasoning reveals just how completely fanaticism had consumed him. By this stage, evidence against covenant doctrine existed everywhere. The Arbiter knew the truth. Human forces knew the truth. The flood itself stood as living proof that Halo was not a tool of transcendence. Truth no longer cared. Like many zealots throughout history, he had moved beyond evidence. Only belief remained. The activation sequence began. Across the galaxy, dormant Halo installations prepared to fire. And for the second time in history, the galaxy approached extinction. And once again, the flood appeared. High Charity arrived at the Ark transformed beyond recognition. The city that had once symbolized covenant power had become a grotesque flood hive. Infections spread throughout its structure. Ancient biomass consumed every surface. The grave mind extended its influence into the heart of the final conflict. The parasite had followed everyone here, just as it had followed the Forerunners 100,000 years earlier. The parallels became impossible to ignore. An alliance of species struggled to stop Halo. A grave mind threatened galactic survival. Ancient Forerunner systems activated after ages of dormancy. History was repeating itself. The difference was who stood at the center. Not the didact, not the librarian, not Forthencho, Master Chief, and the Arbiter, and the survivors of civilizations that had inherited the galaxy. The final battle for the Ark brought every storyline together. Human soldiers fought alongside Sangheili warriors. Covenant loyalists resisted desperately. Flood forces consumed everything within reach. Ancient Forerunner systems continued executing protocols written before recorded history. At the center of it all stood Truth. His death marked more than the end of a leader. It marked the end of the Covenant's founding vision. The great journey died with him. The empire he helped build would never recover. Yet victory remained incomplete. Truth was dead. The flood remained. And the grave mind now controlled more power than at any point since the Forerunner era. The Covenant had fallen, but the oldest enemy in Halo's history still stood. The final battle of the war was still ahead, and once again, the solution would involve a Halo ring. Chapter 31. The final battle of the human Covenant War was not fought for territory. It was not fought for resources. It was not even fought for survival alone. It was fought for the future of the galaxy itself. As the fighting spread across the Ark, ancient history seemed to converge upon a single point. The prophets had spent centuries searching for the great journey. The flood had pursued the consumption of all life. Humanity had struggled simply to survive. The Sangheili had fought for honor, then truth. Every path now led to the same destination, the Ark, the place the Forerunners built when they realized conventional victory was impossible, the place from which the Halo array could be controlled, the place where the final decision had once been made. 100,000 years earlier, the Forerunners stood here facing extinction. Now their successors faced the same choice. The flood's arrival transformed an already desperate situation into a nightmare. High Charity crashed upon the Ark like a diseased moon. What had once been the greatest city of the Covenant now resembled something pulled from a nightmare. Entire districts had been consumed by flood biomass. Ancient architecture disappeared beneath grotesque growths. Every corridor hid infection forms. Every structure threatened to become a battlefield. The grave mind had come in person. For students of Halo lore, this moment carries enormous significance. During the Forerunner era, entire civilizations collapsed beneath the will of the grave minds. The parasite manipulated politics, corrupted artificial intelligences, and consumed worlds. The same intelligence that haunted the ancient galaxy now stood before humanity. The enemy had returned. Not a fragment, not an outbreak, but the flood itself. Master Chief understood the danger immediately. Whatever conflicts remained between humanity and the Covenant suddenly became secondary. The flood represented something far worse. Every moment the parasite remained active increased the possibility of another galactic catastrophe. The irony was impossible to miss. For decades, humanity and the Covenant had slaughtered one another because of lies surrounding the Forerunners. Now both species fought together to prevent the same disaster the Forerunners had once faced. History was repeating itself again, but this time, perhaps, it could end differently. The solution emerged from the Ark itself. One of the facility's remarkable functions involved constructing replacement halo installations. Following the destruction of Installation 4, a new ring had begun forming within the Ark's immense manufacturing systems. It remained unfinished, but it possessed one critical advantage. It could be fired. Not across the entire galaxy, only locally. The distinction mattered enormously. The original Halo array had exterminated sentient life across vast portions of the galaxy. The replacement installation could eliminate the flood infestation on the Ark without repeating the catastrophe of the Forerunner era. For the first time since the flood's return, a genuine solution existed. There was only one problem. Someone had to activate it. The final stages of the campaign brought Master Chief, the Arbiter, and their allies into direct conflict with the Grave Mind's forces. Flood forms flooded every battlefield. Human survivors fought alongside Sangheili warriors. Ancient Forerunner defenses activated throughout the Ark. The war that had begun at Harvest ended amid the ruins of a civilization 100,000 years dead. At the center of it all stood two figures who should never have become allies: a Spartan, an Arbiter, one human, one Sangheili. Representatives of a species that had spent nearly 3 decades trying to exterminate one another. Now they fought side by side. Perhaps that is one of the most important messages in Halo. The greatest threat was never difference. It was ignorance. The Covenant had been built upon misunderstanding. The Human Covenant War had been fueled by lies. Entire civilizations suffered because truth remained hidden. Once truth emerged, cooperation became possible. Difficult, painful, but possible. As fighting intensified, Master Chief pushed toward the unfinished Halo ring. The Flood attempted to stop him. The Gravemind attempted to stop him. Ancient systems failed around him as the installation neared completion. Every step carried the weight of history. The Spartans had been created to stop human rebellion. Instead, they saved humanity. The Halo rings had been created to stop the Flood. Instead, they became objects of worship. The Ark had been built as the last refuge. Now, it became the site of one final battle. When the replacement Halo activated, the result was devastating. The unfinished installation tore itself apart. Massive sections of the Ark suffered catastrophic damage. Flood forces throughout the region were annihilated. The Gravemind's plan collapsed alongside them. For the second time in recorded history, the Flood had been defeated. The difference was the cost. The Forerunners sacrificed the galaxy. Humanity sacrificed a ring. The contrast illustrates just how much had changed. Victory remained costly, but extinction had been avoided. The Human Covenant War was effectively over. The Covenant no longer existed as a unified empire. Truth was dead. The Great Journey had been exposed as a lie. Covenant fleets fragmented into independent factions. Entire species suddenly found themselves free to determine their own futures. The Sangheili emerged from the conflict transformed. For centuries, they had served the prophets. Now they stood alone. The road ahead would not be easy. Civil conflicts remained. Political challenges remained. Yet, for the first time in generations, their future belonged to them. Humanity's situation was hardly better. Billions were dead. Countless colonies had been destroyed. Entire sectors of human space lay in ruins. Reach had fallen. Earth had narrowly survived. The victory felt less like triumph and more like survival, which, in truth, it was. The final scenes of the war capture this mood perfectly. There are celebrations, but they are subdued. Relief outweighs joy. The survivors understand what they have endured. They understand how close the galaxy came to destruction. Most importantly, they understand that many never returned. Among them, apparently, was the Master Chief. As the Ark collapsed around them, the vessel carrying the Chief and Cortana attempted to return through the portal connecting the Ark to the Earth. The journey did not go as planned. The ship was severed during transit. One half reached home. The other vanished into deep space. The galaxy believed the Master Chief dead. Humanity honored him accordingly. The Arbiter returned to Sang Helios. The war ended, the Covenant fell. The Flood disappeared once more into legend. For a brief moment, peace had returned. Yet Halo has always been a story about cycles. The Precursors, the Forerunners, ancient humanity, and the Covenant all fell. History rarely ends, but it changes. And drifting silently through the darkness beyond known space, one Spartan and one artificial intelligence were about to discover that the Forerunners had left behind far more than Halo. The war was over. The next chapter of Halo history was about to begin. The age of the Didact was returning.